Okay, so I don't know how long it's going to last for, but slowly. Okay, slowly. Right. Let me start off with something. I didn't really know that Kevin was going to ask me to be the guest lecturer today, so I would have brought some actual materials of how this works in practice. This was something I knocked up to put on the internet, so the people who wanted to see how my system worked could see it. I've also got on one website. If you look at the website, it's www.goldlist.eu. Okay, you can see the ideas that I'm going to give to you today. Okay, in English, you can read them and study them. They're given freely to everybody that wants. There's no, I'm not selling anything here. I'm a chartered accountant. Okay, I live off audits, but sometimes it annoys me to see the way people go about learning languages all the wrong way. Yeah, and in order to help these people, because people, in life, when I see people putting in an awful lot of an effort into learning languages or doing anything that could be done a lot more easily, and they spend a lot of time, they get themselves very uptight about it, okay, and then they don't succeed, okay? And I feel sorry for people who I don't feel sorry for people who don't work and don't succeed. In fact, quite frankly, sometimes I feel like giving them a little bit of a kick as I go by, okay? But people who work hard and still don't succeed, I would like to help them, okay? And I've always been that way. And so I put together this system with that in mind, okay? So the thing is, people sometimes think, and you hear this again and again if you're a linguist. I'm a linguist by training. I did a degree in languages from Cambridge University. I know about 20 languages, okay, including Russian. Несколько людей говорят, что я хорошо говорю по-русски, но это ваше решение. Хорошо ли я говорю или нет? So basically, I speak about 20, and you could say that I ought to know how to learn them, yes? And people then sometimes say, well, it's all right for you to give me ideas on how to learn languages, but you're a language genius, you know, 20 languages. You could have been the Pope, John Paul II. I hear that a lot in Poland, you understand. But I'm not a language genius, they say. You are. How can you help me? Whatever method you come up with, whatever method might be there, it's for the likes of you and not for the likes of me. And I say, well, hang on a minute, what makes you think that? And they say, well, I've tried, you know, God knows, I've tried to learn languages. I've been, you know, at it, you know, with trying to cram vocabulary into my mind. Yeah, well, that's exactly where you've gone wrong. That's exactly where you've gone wrong. People go through the education system, given little exams to do here and there, told, you know, even, I mean, I've got one guy that teaches me Japanese at the Warsaw, he's at the Warsaw University, teaches me Japanese, and he says, I must learn 25 signs per week. I think to myself, well, that puts a lot of pressure on you, because, you know, you've got to learn 25 new signs per week, and they don't get any easier to learn, Japanese signs and Chinese signs, as you go along learning them, and he's under continual pressure to push these things into his head. And, you know, this is a misunderstanding as to how you should learn languages, because there's one language that everybody managed to learn, okay? There is one language that everybody succeeded in learning. And do you know what that language is that everybody managed to learn?
The language of body.
See, well laid back. I like the way this is going, but no, it wasn't that particular language. Yes, body language is a language that everybody knows. Well, yes, most people do know that. But that wasn't. I like that answer better than the real answer. But the real answer is that the language that everybody manages to learn is their own language. You actually find only very, very few people who do not competently speak their mother tongue. Okay? There are not that many, but you get people that fail to read and write. Not many. Again, a tiny proportion. In Russia this must be very, very low. Yeah? Because literacy is extremely high, over 99%. But in some countries, you know, it's not quite so successful because they don't have such a great thing like the Cyrillic alphabet, so they struggle a bit more. But in Russia and in most countries, almost everybody can write and read. But wherever you go, even in Japan, where almost nobody gets to learn the 50,000 signs that their language has, in theory, although, like I say, nobody actually can use all of them, they still all speak very good Japanese, yes? And every Russian person, except for people that are sort of like got a problem with alcohol or drugs and can't manage to string a few sentences together, but most people that are not, in any country, I'm not talking about Russia or Britain or anything, but in any country, people can speak their own mother tongue, but it doesn't matter for this great knowledge they have of their mother tongue that they didn't cram, they didn't sit there, most mothers didn't give to their children, here's your 25 words for today. Okay? I don't know if your mother ever did that for you. Yeah? But teachers, language teachers, and I'm sorry Kevin, this is going to impact on you a little bit, but you probably know it's coming because you've seen my stuff. They do, yeah? And you gotta learn to take it easy. Okay? You've got to learn, the first thing you've got to learn is this is your language, okay, that you're learning. It's going to become part of your property, your intellectual property. It's going to be something which adds a multiplication to the value that you have. Each of you know other things other than language, okay? Each of you have got your own specializations, the things that you've studied up till now, the things that you do at work, yes? Maybe somebody's an architect, maybe another person knows bookkeeping, maybe another person knows some law, or whatever it is that you know. Maybe it's, even if it's only bricklaying, yeah? And you all look too clever to be doing only bricklaying, but even if it was only bricklaying, if you then add into the mix a language, that gives you the multiplication effect. Yes, you can do bricklaying in Britain, but when there's no work in Britain, an English bricklayer who has learned German can go and get a good job in Germany. And that's actually happened in the past. These days, perhaps it's the other way around, that people are more likely to come from Germany to Britain sometimes, but that's, whatever you do, it increases the number of times that you're going to be useful. And if you're particularly specialised in a field of knowledge, let's say that you're a doctor, and let's say that you're a neurologist who actually knows more about a neurological condition than anybody else, okay? It might be a very rare neurological condition, and so therefore, if you live in a country like, say, Albania, but you're a fantastic doctor for this neurological condition, well, it's a shame, isn't it? Because you can only really look after people who speak Albanian, unless you have a translator sitting next to you the whole time. But when this doctor, this genius doctor who only knows Albanian, when he learns English, for example, or learns Russian, he can suddenly see and treat and do good to millions of people. Yeah? So it multiplies whatever else you do. So it's well worth doing it. It's part of what becomes you. It helps you to think in different ways. It helps you to see the world in different ways. It gives you whole other information, yeah, and it gives you a whole different perspective. In fact, it gives you a second drugoye ya, yeah, a second me, is the other person which is within you that uses that other language. Yes. So it's like having don't think it's like schizophrenia. It's not like that. It's just having a whole different side to your personality that develops along with the language. It lives in you. It grows in you. It helps you to develop a brain capable of more in surprising ways than it would be without it. So you've got to be very motivated. Once you see these things, it's going to motivate you a lot to continue. So that means that when you learn any new word in this language, it's going to be a friend for you. Going back to the word friend that we had up there earlier. It's going to be something that you're going to live with, that you're going to love, that you're going to have with you, that new word, all the way through your life. Okay? And you don't want to learn a language to pass an exam. You might want to pass the Cambridge second certificate or whatever it is. I don't even know what certificates they are. But you might want to pass a Cambridge exam or whatever it is. Yes, I don't know if you're teaching for an exam.
We have various levels of exams that we instruct for. This is obviously business level.
Okay. Well, I'm not knocking it because it's a nice way to pace yourself. Okay. But you should only really think of these exams as a nice pacer, as a nice measuring mark for you along the way. Okay. But wouldn't it be a pity if you crammed like you do for certain other exams? Like to get through mathematics in school, and you learn how to do trigonometry. Who can do trigonometry today unless they do it for their work? And I don't think many people do. Yeah? If somebody said, well, you know, when your kids grow up and they say, hey, mum, dad, show me how to do trigonometry, you're going to say, oh, I expect me to remember that. That was, you know, 20 years ago. Yeah? And that's how most people are with the things that they learn and cram for exams. They forget them. That's because of something called the long and short-term memory. Now, if you learn a language, you don't want to learn it just for an exam and then forget it all 3 months afterwards. And therefore, I've devised a system which is going to enable you to take things easy enough and at a measured pace so that they go into what's called the long-term memory. And therefore, I had to research. I didn't research it with, you know, clinically. I read other people's clinical research, especially Ebbinghaus, who was he was a person of the 1920s, a German guy, and he researched this clinically. He did all of the sterling research on human memory. And all I didn't even read Ebbinghaus. I read people that had read Ebbinghaus and digested Ebbinghaus and spat it out in language that I could understand as a non-professional psychologist. But I understood from this version of Ebbinghaus that I read and studied exactly what the relationship is between the long and the short-term memory, and also how human beings go about learning words which are unfamiliar to them, and how many they're likely to be able to remember for good, okay, when they've only come across them once, even without especially trying. And there's the important thing. When you try, what Ebbinghaus says is, when you try to cram, when you try too hard to cram by continual repetition over and over again, okay, words into your head, you put them into your short-term memory. You will feel as though you know them, okay? After 16 days, or actually 14, I say 16 because all the short-term memory courses offer you the money back after 16 days. Now, if you've ever noticed that, there's courses and they give you your money back after 16 days, yeah? But of course, by that time, you think that course is fantastic because it's showing you how to learn to, and it crams a load of words into your short-term memory. The short-term memory is pretty good, okay, and it's fast, okay? You can push in hundreds and hundreds of words in that time and give yourself the feeling as though you're really progressing fast in the language. However, probably you'll only really retain 25%, possibly 30% of what you've crammed in that space of time. Yes, 30% would be according to Ebbinghaus, but if you've really crammed it in and really utilised your short-term memory, it's going to be to the detriment of the long-term memory, and so it won't even really be 30%. And so what will happen is you're gonna say, okay, I'm going to keep this course, I like it, and I won't take it back for my money back after 16 days. And then what will happen is you'll start to think it's your fault, but you're going to start forgetting the language because the period cuts in after 16 days that you can't remember what you learned 2 weeks ago. But you will remember some of it. That's Ebbinghaus's idea. You're going to remember a certain proportion, 30%, of what you learned at the outset. And so therefore, instead of trying very, very hard to learn that vocabulary for tonight or for this week, it's absolutely wrong. Yes? You need to write it down the way that I've showed you. Now, if I can, I won't take it because it's just been recorded, so perhaps a lot of people will watch this as well as you being able to watch it later. What this is, effectively, is just it's a mock-up of a book. A book like with the squared paper that you can buy from any shop, blank squared paper. It's nice to have a hardback one so you can carry it around with you without getting it damaged. It's nice to have a nice thick one like the ones that get imported from China. And about 40 squares deep, so that you can put 25 words at the top here and number them 1 to 25. And the reason this is that you can set yourself objective tasks in terms of amounts of vocabulary to learn, and you can know that as you process it through the system, you are going to learn that vocabulary, and it's without fail, because if you haven't remembered it, then you don't chuck it out of the system. You only chuck out what you've remembered. Okay, so here you go with 25 going down this side. Yes, 1 to 25. So you can see on the first page here, there's 25 there from this first one to the 25th. It doesn't matter that you can't understand them. I wrote that in Polish in that example. It really doesn't matter that you can't understand them. It doesn't really matter, in a sense, where you take them from. Whether you take them from your course book, whether you take them from the dictionary. You should use materials which are attractive, and you should use more than one set of materials. Okay. so that they please you as you do them, you're enjoying doing it, okay? This is all for the memory game side. I'm going to say a little bit in a minute about that and retrace my steps. But just to get into the heart of this piece of paper, you take this no sooner, you mustn't do it any earlier than 14 days, okay, 2 weeks. This is why we date it here. The date is put on there, okay? We do those first 25, and then maybe you turn the page, there's a second 25 there. In fact, that's the second 25, that's the third 25, that's the second sheet, that's the third sheet, okay? And you can see that each time, at the top left-hand corner, I call that the head list. That's what comes in from whatever materials you've been using. That's the body of vocabulary that you've set out to learn. So you put that into the system as the head list, okay? Glavnispisak, the head list, okay? Now, you're working through by repetitive, but not regular, not frequent, infrequent, no more than once every 2 weeks, okay? For that thing, you can always make the list longer and longer on more pages of the book. You see, that's why you have a nice big thick book. And you don't touch it. You write it down, you write down your vocabulary and what it means, but you don't immediately try and learn it. That's the key. That's the whole key to this. Because by not immediately trying to learn it, you then let it lie. Just like you would if you were a baby, learning your first language, which you very successfully learned. You didn't try and deliberately learn anything, and it worked. Okay? People deliberately try and learn their second, third, fourth, fifth language, and they give themselves 3 times more work than they need. Okay? Because I do it this way, I've learned 20 languages. If I'd done it the traditional way, the way that people teach it in school, I wouldn't have learned that many. I was lucky. I had wise teachers in school that said, learn whatever way you like. If it works for you, do it. And so I started thinking, what way will work for me? And soon I came to something not too far off this. But it was only in my 20s that I really devised the system. So basically, and that was after I came into accountancy, because there are things that I learned in accountancy that helped me sort of organise it. So basically, you see, this is when you write it out again, you haven't been watching it every day, you haven't been trying to actively learn this every day. You've let it lie, you've done things further down, deeper in your book. After 2 weeks you came back and you look through this and you say, which are the words which I remember? Yeah? If I remember a word, okay, I can get rid of it, okay? And I might put an X by that one, okay? If I don't really think that I've remembered the words, I can at least put in a thing which means that I'm going to put them together, so that here I can actually just start turning the individual words into phrases gradually, or groups of words which I learn on one line. Actually, what will probably happen is that you can find it very easy to get that down from 25 to 17, even without putting words on together in one line. But if you can't do it, then you start to put the words, you group the words together to make them learned in groups, and that can help you do that as well. So you've got 2 things, either just completely throwing out the things that you've learned, or grouping them together so that 30% is gone. You see? 25 pieces of vocabulary minus 30% gives you 17. Okay, you let that lie. You let that lie. You do it as well you keep on doing it as well afterwards for the next one, yes? So that here on the second sheet, what was numbers 26 to 50 becomes numbers 18 to 35. It doesn't have to be precisely 18 to 35, it might turn out it's 19 to 36 or something else like that. You don't have to be absolutely strictly religious about the 30%. That's your aim. Okay? But you don't have to be complete about it. What you should do is give it a sequential numbering through your system, so that your second list, that's your head list, this is your second list, always has a numbering from 1 onwards through the number that you have, and you'll be able to tell whether, generally speaking, after you've done 100 or 1,000, whether you're there pretty much on your 30% knocked down or not, okay? Again, then you're moving, so you've moved it across from here to here, okay? So what was this much vocabulary here becomes this much vocabulary here, yes? Again, after 2 weeks you're doing the same thing again. You'll notice that the date that I've put there is another 2 weeks later than there. It doesn't have to be bang on 2 weeks. It can be anything from 2 weeks to 2 months. It can be more than 2 months. I've come back to things and carried on with them 6 years later. but then I find that I don't get anywhere near 30%. Okay, I'm pretty much then lucky if I can knock down 10%. Okay, but it still works. It still works, and you still knock down something. So basically, you can't go wrong by leaving it too long. Okay, you just got to keep the rhythm going. But then, if you've got the motivation, it will happen. Okay, but you must avoid being tempted to go before the 14 days are up, because you're asking yourselves, which of these words here have I remembered, and which of them do I really not remember? And you don't have to cover them up or anything, or ask friends to test you, or any of the usual things that people do. You can just play the game with yourself and see what it actually tells you about your own subconscious, because it's the subconscious that makes you decide, that decides for you what am I going to learn into my long-term memory. Okay, when you consciously remember, it's always a short-term memory thing. Okay, when I say I will remember this and this landmark, okay, because I'm driving this way, okay, and I try to remember there's the Lukoil on the left, and shortly after that I've got 36 apteka on the right, and I know that I have to turn there, and I'm going to remember that this is the place where I've got Lukoil here and 36.6 on the right, and I turn right there, yeah, and I push that into my head, and that tells me how to get back. Okay, that lasts 14 days. If I'm coming back after more than 14 days, I probably can't even remember that I tried to use those landmarks. Okay, I suggest you use landmarks which are going to be there in 14 days' time, though, because you're certainly giving yourself a hard time if you decide to use a sort of plakat or something like that, an advertising billboard, which is going to be changed in a couple of weeks. You know, like the Anne Hathaway billboards that are up there all the time at the moment, which are very alluring, but try not to look at them. But we basically see that the long-term memory, that's the sort of thing that you don't try to learn to it. Okay, you think that you will remember Lukoil and the 30s, because you said these are the things I'm going to try to remember. They're my landmarks. But you might discover that after you've been driving a certain route backwards and forwards for many years, yeah, that there are certain things which you never ever tried to remember, you know, and all of a sudden you discover you can remember them. One day, for example, you're driving along the same route, you never tried to remember the dry cleaning shop on the right-hand side, because you use a completely different dry cleaning shop somewhere else, yeah? But then you suddenly discover, oh, that's changed to a flower shop. And you think, well, how did you remember that? You never tried to remember it. But those are the things that you remember subconsciously, without trying. You're going to remember those things for the rest of your life. And if you were to come down that road, not see it for 60 years and come as an old lady and say, I remember there was a dry cleaning shop there. There's a flower shop there now. You've just appeared, haven't you? Well, actually, I've been here 56 years. But, I remember it like yesterday. Well, you would, because it's the long-term memory. Yes? And that's the way it works. You don't need to give any effort to your long-term memory. Another thing I can tell you about the long-term memory, we know of no limitation to the power of the long-term memory. You know what the limitations are on the short-term memory. It's the amount that you can cram into it in 14 days, because then it starts leaking. Okay? So 14 days before an exam, where you've got to actually push out a lot of stuff for the exam, that's when you start to revise, using the word that came up earlier. And we revise from 14 days before an exam. That's cramming things into the short-term memory. Okay? And that gives us the best chance of all at passing the exam, but then we forget it afterwards. Okay? But you never want to do that ever, 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 even for an exam, because it's a complete waste of your time if what you want to do with a language is have it as part of your person for the rest of your life. Yeah? And that's what you really want from a language, because you're always going to be able to use it. If you learn English, and you've already got very good English, but if you learn any other language, and really even take your English one stage further, or 2 stages further, and become really very, very, very good at it, and kind of knock Shakespeare off his perch or something, okay? You're going to want to have whatever you learn with you forever, and that's why you don't need to put too much effort to learning vocabulary the minute you get it, or the week you get it. You write it down calmly in these sheets. After 2 weeks, you write it, you review it, see which you've learned, you compress it, kick out what you know you've got. Even the act of kicking something out, even the act of dismissing a piece of vocabulary helps you learn it because there's a rule that says for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. That came from, I think it was Newton in physics. But in the psychology world, for every conscious thing you do, there's an equal and opposite subconscious reaction. Okay? So when you throw something away, you remember you've thrown it away, you don't go looking for it afterwards. If you give somebody a book and say, it's okay, you don't need to pay me for it, it's yours, you don't need to give it back to me later, you know, then you remember that you gave it away. You don't start to think, oh, I lent him the book, why hasn't he given it back? Because you know you gave it to him. So although you threw it away or you gave it away, okay, you remember that you don't have it. Okay, so therefore you remember exactly what it was that you gave away. So even the act of throwing something out of this system, that confirms you in the act of learning it. Okay, that's an important harnessing of the. Kevin, do you look as though
Two questions I have.
Okay.
First of all, the mechanics I'm trying to get straight.
Mm-hmm.
We start with our first head list of 25.
That's right.
Don't touch it until after 14 days.
That's right. Don't open it. Don't read it. Don't.
You showed us on the second page a second head list.
Yes, that's right. You could do that second head list the second day. You can carry on doing second, third, fourth, 100 pages if you like of head list work. You can do. This is an important point. Good that you've asked this question. You should take a break after every time you do one page of 25, or every group you do. Just take a short break, okay, of 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Do something completely different, okay? You might watch a video on YouTube, and watch one of mine if you like, plug, and then come back and do another session of this on the next page, okay? Don't immediately do the same words again, just carry on with your materials, turning the vocabulary into another page of your head list, okay? But don't try and do too much at once. I would say that if you keep a rhythm where you sit and calmly work, 25 words in 25 minutes, or 25 words I usually think 20 minutes, because you've selected the vocabulary, you've got it there in your vocab book, you write it out nicely, and you write it by hand. Don't use the computer. That's in a computer, but that's just because I had to put something up on the internet. But it's much better to use your hand, yes, because the hand has a special memory attached to it, and it's very much a long-term memory. That's why you always sign your name the same way, and you can also sign the name exactly the same way with every part of your body. I often am very very interested to see, you know, when you come into Russia, you have to fill in the customs declaration. At the end it says podpis litsa, yes, signature with the face, yeah. So you go. The funny thing is that even if you did sign something with your face, it would be exactly the same. Yeah, no, it doesn't really mean that. I'm kidding. But even if you sign something with your face, it would actually look like the signature you do with your hand. Okay, because the memory attached to writing, okay, is very much what you said earlier, body language. It's body language, and it's very powerful. Okay, so and it's more powerful than typing in front of a screen. Okay, yes, there are you learn how the orders of things, but it's much more abstract and less natural than the actual signature of the hand or your handwriting, writing out words and developing a handwriting in an unfamiliar script. Yes, so that if somebody, you know, earlier on we saw Kevin's very brave attempts at writing these words. Okay, but it's absolutely right to write them out by hand. Yes, in this case, you could probably still tell that a foreigner wrote it. Okay, it doesn't look too Russian the way that I write, because obviously, well, apart from anything else, I'm writing it on the blackboard. But at least you should see that I wrote it fairly fluidly, and it's worth doing it by hand because it gets you into practice, and you write the things out, and it's a way in which the memory will definitely grab it quicker. Okay, when you get to the end of the list, you just do it nicely. You try and make it nice and neat, so it's a pleasure for you to look at it again when you see it again. And then what you need to do is you need to just read it out. Okay, when you finish it, just finish. You finish 25 words. Just read them out aloud. Okay, that's worth doing. I'm not sure how far into your listen I'm going, but
that's fine. The second question: we've talked about the mechanics of generating one list, two lists. Again, getting back to our introductory thoughts.
Mhm.
How much material do we put in here before it starts to confuse or dilute the learning that's going on?
You mean
Talking
into
about,
into the first head list.
yes, certainly your example is
Mhm.
very simple, a word
Yes.
and a meaning.
Mhm.
But we've talked about having words,
Mhm.
understanding the part of speech that they
Yeah,
belong to,
yeah.
understanding the phonetics of the word.
Okay. So how much information to put on a single line?
Yes.
Okay. Good question.
And
I'm gonna ans- I'm gonna ans-
relationships to other
Yeah.
words, you know.
I'm going to answer that by going backtracking my whole lecture to the alternative beginning that I had in mind, which is what I actually wrote down here, and I'll take it from that end, from that side, and then we'll come to an answer of your question, which I think you'll then have a ability to understand very well. But just before I get there, though, let me just say, of course, it goes on to number 4 after another 2 weeks, and then what you then do is, once you've got that far, is you might want to open up a new book. Okay, it could be a thinner book because it's going to be a lot thinner, because 3 or 4 of those will actually make the 25 at the top of your second book. Okay, and again you just number them in the same order, so that what was numbers 1 to 26 here will be numbers 1 to 17 there, and the things which are 1 to 25 at this point will have been the first 100, or some of them out of the first 100, the most difficult to remember, the most difficult for your long-term memory to catch. You won't know what they are because it's subconscious. You don't know how it samples it. But then in your second book, you do that. And you take it through 2 whole books. Okay? By which time this is only 10% or less than 10% of what you had at the outset. But by this time, you genuinely know these words. Okay? You will know them. Okay? Yes, they're still there as the words which you found most difficult to remember, but you'll know them as well as you need to by that time. Okay, so you just take it through 2 whole books like that, and you've done it. Okay, you know that if you do that, and you take the required amount of time with the resting periods, that no matter how much you put in, okay, you're going to learn that vocabulary. You're going to learn that vocabulary because you're only throwing out things that you know that you've learned after 14 days. And that means that it's in your long-term memory. It's passive. You may not be able to have it on the tip of your tongue, but that doesn't matter. It only takes 3 days in the country to activate all that passive knowledge that you've made on the way. Yeah? People think that going to live in a country is the best way to learn a language because they've seen people that have gone to countries and come back suddenly speaking languages. And therefore they go there thinking it's going to happen to them. Of course it doesn't. What they don't realise is that the people that have done this miracle work, they've done a lot of learning before they ever go there. The people that are out there, they've never been able to activate their knowledge, but they went through things which put it into the passive part of the brain. And when they go there, the knowledge is there, it just gets brought up to the part of the brain which uses things currently. Okay? So the fact that you don't feel fluent, that's irrelevant. If you go through this system, you've got that language. If you want to test it, get yourself a 3-day holiday in some English-speaking country, like Cyprus, and just try it out, and you'll see. In 3 days, it all comes up like magic. And that's the result of the work that you do, even though you don't feel like you're getting anywhere. Now to answer your question, because I just wanted to get to the end of it, go back a little bit there. To answer your question as to how much information to put on a line, I want to go back to the beginning and ask you a question. If somebody comes along and says, what do you need to know a language? You know, how would you actually break down the tasks involved in learning a language? You could say that there are various tasks involved. There's the general things, and there's the specific. Okay? Now the general means things like the phonetic system, because whatever words you've got, for example, let's take Russian and English. Whatever words you've got in Russian, whether they're nouns, whether they're adjectives, whether they're adverbs, whether they're prepositions, one thing you can say about all of them, they're all written in Cyrillics, right? even if Russians write down Margaret Thatcher, they write it in Cyrillics. So it's not like some languages they change. In Japanese they even change to romaji, which means angliski bukvi, in order to write down certain things which they don't like writing in, or that they can't write very well down in katakana. Yeah, but what you can say about Russian is that whatever word there is in Russian is going to be written in Cyrillics. Whatever word is written in English, it ain't going to be written in Cyrillics because we never use them. Okay, most people don't know anything about Cyrillics unless they've tried to learn it for some reason because of wanting to learn Russian usually. So the phonetic system is a general thing; it's pervasive throughout the language. And then you've also got the grammar. When you get to this point, you can see that there are general rules. There are rules, and there are what do you call them? You call them regular paradigms. Oh, regular paradigms is what I wrote. Now that sounds like a lot of big words, but basically what it means is that things behave normally. That's, for example, if I were to take Russian, yes, it would be the verbs that are in at, yeah, думает, right? Гуляет. They're easy, yes. You don't have to learn any sound changes, yeah, like you would have to for a number of other verbs, yeah. For example, spать, я сплю. Where's the L come from, yeah? So the regular paradigms are the ones that you can learn, okay, and you learn those separately necessarily to this, but you can put down model phrases of the regular paradigms, model usages into the system as well. Okay, you just note down that it's a regular paradigm. Okay, so you can just put down certain sentences, certain ways in which the grammar works into the system too. Okay, but then you've also then got your irregular paradigms, your irregular verbs, your irregular nouns. Yes, the fact that you don't say we have the word drug. Okay, so you don't say drugi, you say druzya, right? So if you're learning Russian, then you don't need to put down lampa, lampy, because it's very regular, yeah? So if you've learned the regular paradigm, a feminine noun ending in a is going to have I as its plural, you don't need to write that down for lampa, okay? But when you learn the word druk, you should put the plural down druzya because it's not regular, okay? So therefore, I don't put down, okay, friend, going back to friend, okay, I wouldn't put down friends for the plural, okay? But I would put down goose, geese, because it's not regular, it's an umlaut plural to give it its linguistic expression, okay? If I'm talking about a regular verb in English, help, okay? Help is now regular in English since the 18th century. Prior to that it was a strong verb, okay? Help, he helped me, okay? And I have helped you, hopefully, today, okay? Because it's regular, it's a weak verb, as we say, I don't write down, or I don't advise you to write down, you can just write help, weak, okay? If you are very advanced and you wanted to study Jacobean English from the 17th century, you could write help, holpen, okay? But you have to write down afterwards archaic, because we haven't spoken that way in English, not even in Britain, although actually Americans are more conservative because they still say gotten and we don't say that. Make you smile now. Help, holpen is not regular English, so you'd have to give it as archaic, okay? And I don't suggest that you necessarily need that for a business class, but if you, for example, wanted to get into restoration comedies or even before that, even medieval mystery plays in a kind of Middle English, you'd have to know those things, and then you'd write that down as an exception. So wake, woke. What's the past participle?
Woke.
Woken. Yeah? Americans do say woke as past participle, but it's not correct, sorry. But if you're American, you can play merry havoc with the past participles because they have a little bit more latitude than we do. But if it's strong, you'd write all of it down. If it's weak, you just write it's weak, it's regular. Yes. So therefore, you know, if you're a beginner, then you should write begin, begin, began, begun. Yeah. But you wouldn't write. Well, actually, most of the verbs that are strong you meet while you're still a beginner, because they're the most basic and most often rehearsed in the English language. So walk. Walk. You wouldn't bother to write down walk, walked, walked. You simply say it's regular. So just put that. But what you then have to do is you asked, would you write down the pronunciation? Well, sometimes you have to, because if you don't write down after this, you probably pronounce that differently than me.
Walk.
Oh right, you're right. You say that. Walk. I say walk. He says walk. But that's okay. We love each other, the two nations. But you know, either is fine. You can write down the pronunciation, because the important thing for you to know is nobody's going to say, whether it's an American or an Englishman or a Scotsman, nobody's going to say walk. Okay, that's pretty clear. None of us say walk. Okay, it was walkian at the time of the Vikings. Okay, and it meant to bob up and down slightly like that originally. Okay, because that's what people do when they go on the street. You can just see them. Yeah. So that's where the term comes from, but in very ancient English. So you don't need to write walk, walked, walked, but you do need to write down the pronunciation. Begin, began, begun. Well, do you need it for that? If you've already got used to the idea that the U on its own isn't U, yeah, then you don't need to write it. If that's still causing you problems, then you might write. Yeah? Just to make sure that you don't say begin, begun, be good, be good. So you know so you might do that, but the thing is to put what's needed, okay? To put what's needed, but to put, and where did that cross go? To put the things in, okay, which are irregular, okay. Put the things in which are irregular. Friend, I wouldn't write friends. Yes, I wouldn't write friends for the plural, because it's a regular plural. Okay? So I just wouldn't write it. Yeah? I learned my regular paradigms another way. Okay? But I don't know that friend isn't pronounced friend, yeah, unless I write down friend. Yeah? So therefore that's what I write. Not the plural because it's regular, but the pronunciation. And the fact that it's a noun. Okay? But if you write druk on the other side, sorry, druk. If I've written druk on the other side there, yeah, then you know it's a noun because druk is a noun, yeah, and it's clear. So write what's necessary so that you can get everything that you need to know about that word, because sometimes the irregularities are not where you think they are. Okay, sometimes they're in the plurals, sometimes they're in the pronunciation. So wherever that irregularity is, you write it down in the line when you learn it. If you don't learn it that way at the beginning, but you find that out later, then add it in the second or third reiteration. Okay, so that you get it in the end. But don't stress over it. The key is not stressing over it. So the rules and the regular paradigms, you can learn those separately. And it's an exercise, okay, an exercise in comparison. Okay, you always want to compare the grammar of the language you're learning now with the grammar of your own language, if it's the first time you've learned a foreign language, or with another grammar that you've learned of another language. Okay, so if you've learned English and then later you decide to learn German, you'll always be comparing the grammar of German with the grammar of English, and when it's not the same as English, you'll say, well, how does this relate back to Russian? And in this way, you'll discover that the more languages that you learn, the more they help each other. Yes, they also help each other in the fact that there's a lot of loan words going around. So they help each other there as well. But it's an exercise in comparison and understanding. This much you have to understand, you know, exactly what a noun is and what it does, and why an adjective isn't a noun, etc., and what the past tense is, and why you use, you know, vid. Yes, how do you call it? Nieskończony vid, how do you say? I forgot because I'm thinking the Polish terms for it, but the perfective and the imperfective aspect. Yeah, there's делать and not делать. Yeah, совершенный, несовершенный вид. Yeah, you have to understand why. You know, почему он сказал сделал? Why did he say сделал and not делал? Yeah, you have to understand why it was and what the difference would have been if it had used несовершенный вид. Yes, the imperfect aspect. These big paradigms, they need you to understand. Yeah, so you need to look at it and understand how the language works. Okay. They say that you need 500 hours to learn a language. Okay? Some people knock it down to 400. To get a vocabulary which will pass you what they used to call O-level in the British education system, which is about 2,000 words. Okay? That's what they say. In fact, you don't need anything like that amount if you do it according to my methodology. Because you're not cramming things over and over again, that means you're not spending time trying to learn things which you're only ever going to keep in your short-term memory. You only spend time learning on things which you know that you didn't put in your long-term memory, therefore you need to look at them again, so which is considerably less than you think. Whereas people that cram, they're repeating things over and over again much more than they really need to, and they're wasting time that way. Okay, so for busy people, they should be learning to the long-term memory. So only 80 hours of the whole time, let's say 400 hours, only 80 hours of that time needs to be spent on actually understanding how the language works. Yeah, and that gives you a very good grounding on all the different aspects of grammar. It's a very rich amount of time to spend, okay, on looking at all the different aspects of grammar that a language has, okay, and understanding them. If it's a little bit tricky the first time, okay, maybe a bit of a squeeze to get it into 80 hours. By the time you're into your 4th or 5th languages, you don't need anything like 80 hours. You can do it in 20 hours because you're comparing it and you're just doing an analysis of exceptions to do this part of it. The irregular things, okay, and then the specific things, which are things like words, okay, and even the words themselves, they behave in regular and irregular ways as we saw. Words, phrases, which is particular specific things, you know, like Russian proverbs. When we looked at the very first thing, we had the analysis of Russians harnessing fast and driving slowly, whatever it was, harnessing slowly and driving fast, yes? I thought of some proverbs which I'd learned, yes? Какой же русский не любит быстрой еды? That's why you all like McDonald's, right? Yes, they are. And also, что русскому здоровье, то немцу смерть. Yeah? What is health for the Russian is death for the German. Yes, that was also something that sprang to mind when he started making German Russian comparisons and how different the two nations were. In fact, probably rather less different than people give them credit for, because the Germans get themselves into awful chaos sometimes. But I've seen them working. It's not as ideal as people like to think. But and another one, proverb, a Russian proverb, which I thought of, is "Первый блин всегда комом." Yeah, these sort of proverbs, they exist in every language. They're part of the national, if you like, wisdom of those languages. None of those proverbs that I gave actually exist in English as proverbs, but you can learn other English proverbs. You know, like "If at first you don't succeed, try again." Yeah, that's a nice English proverb, and so you can learn them, and they're set phrases. Okay, just like adverbial phrases. See you next Tuesday. Perhaps that's not the best phrase, the best thing to say. Be careful if you say to people in England, "See you next Tuesday," because it's a kind of way of calling somebody something. If you think about it, you'll get there. All of these things are things which are specific, and you can put these things along with all the irregularities into the system, into the gold list system. So gold list system, okay, is nothing but a memory game. Okay, that's what this is. That's the gold list system. Okay, and it's called the gold list system because you're looking for the gold. You put things in at the beginning. It's like panning for gold. You put in a lot of mud at the beginning, and you start filtering it through, and at the end you just get the gold nuggets that are there. The gold nuggets are what you're looking for. You've got to think of yourself as, I'm trying to search in my study of the language for the words which my long-term memory finds the most difficult to actually learn. And when I find what they are, maybe I'll even find out something about myself that I didn't know. And that's also an interesting thing. Okay? So you've got to put whatever you don't do here, the more that you do doing it this way, which is just your usual exercises that you do, you know, you get an explanation of a grammatical structure, and then you get given exercises to do on it, and you do the exercises. That's the sort of work that's here. You can't get away from it, but it's not the majority of what you do. Okay? If that's 400 hours, there's 80 hours. Here's 320 hours. Okay? 320 hours spent on the gold list will not give you a vocabulary of 200 words. Okay? 320 hours on the gold list will give you a vocabulary of 8,000 words. If it's done in a nice measured way, for the simple reason that, and you can do the mathematics yourselves, if I write 25 words out, okay, at the start of my list, by the time I've gone through, so that 17 is the next one, 12 is the next one, something like 8 is the next one, or maybe 9, etc., and I add them all up, when I add those up it comes to 75, roughly, okay? 75 is 3 times 25, okay? So the ratio of the number of times you write that word out to the number of words you've written is 3. The average number of times you see a word in this system is 3. Ebbinghaus, in the 1920s, discovered that the average number of times his students needed to see a word in order to memorize it, and Ebbinghaus's trick was he took words from Hungarian and gave them to students that had never learned Hungarian. Okay? He discovered that the average number of, and Hungarian is nice and easy from the point of view that it doesn't take you long to learn how to pronounce something from learning the alphabet. It's very regular. But the words don't look anything like our words. Only a few of them do. You know, silva is Hungarian for sliva, a plum. Yeah. So that there are some of them which obviously came from Slavonic. Kulch is kluch, key. But mainly they're not. They're mainly not Slavonic words. What I've just told you is the exceptional words which look Slavonic because they happen to be loaned in from Slavonic. But most words of Hungarian are not like anything in the European system. And he used those words which were unfamiliar and made his students learn them, and he measured how many iterations it took them to learn them. And his findings, okay, are the same as the way I've designed my system, so that they agree to what Ebbinghaus did, which is a repeatable experiment. and has been repeated many times, never been disproven, always been confirmed. I don't do the science, I don't have a laboratory, but plenty of, there are psychologists out there doing that sort of stuff for us. It's up to the linguist to harness what's being published and turn that into a reasonable methodology so that the work of a linguist becomes easy, okay? And that's what my system does, okay? So if you think of this, 75 is your average number of times. That means that on average for the 25 words, okay, that take you 20 minutes, okay? 20 minutes is a third of an hour, okay? But, so 20 minutes is a third of an hour, but you're going to look at each one on average 3 times. That means that learning those 25 words, okay, doing it this way, okay, will take a total of 1 hour, okay? Okay? Divide or take 320 and times it by 25, and I think you'll see that I've got it more or less right, yes? So for 8,000 words. That's why I know that it's true, and you can see the logic of it, okay? Nobody's selling that, okay? First they can't sell it because I made it and I've given it to humanity free, because I don't need any money from that, okay? I take money for audits. If anybody wants an audit, I'll very happily take money, but this is free. I'm writing the book. It's already down on the website. Nobody can take the method. It's free for everybody. The only thing I ask is that they give it faithfully, and that they give they call it the goal list method. They don't give it their own name, etc., etc., etc. But I hope that you'll be able to use it, share it, that it gives you the ability to learn languages more effectively. Because, like I said at the beginning, the worst thing is for people to spend a lot more time than they need learning languages. That's what suits this guy. Sorry, Alex. I don't mean that in a mean way. It doesn't suit. I know that personally you're a very nice guy and you would never do this. But the language teachers don't like this usually, okay? Because it means that the language courses which are based on cramming into the short-term memory, they see the same students come back every year, okay? So it's good for the bottom line, and so they all love to do it. Everybody likes Callan method for learning English, okay? Hope you don't teach Callan method. Hope you don't teach the Paul Daniels method. No, the way you teach is fine. Don't take it that I'm sort of, because it was nice and relaxed and very good for the long-term memory, what you were doing. Using it, making pleasant, interesting conversations, that's the sort of thing which will help. These are applications, okay? But when you when you go home and start to think, well, I need to take possession of the language myself, I need to work on it, I need to do my homework, etc. Start yourself a gold list. Start yourself a gold list. Get a nice big fat book and start the gold list. Don't do it just for 14 days and compare it to a short-term method, because for 14 days that short-term method's going to look really clever and my method's going to look stupid for the first 14 days, okay? Because it's not going to give you as much quick learning as the cramming method. But after a few months, you'll see the big difference. You'll know that you've gone a lot further ahead on a straight line. Whereas the other methods, you start to think, well, where the hell am I? I can't remember what I learned a few months ago. I'm going backwards instead of forwards. Whereas in this system, you always go forward. The writing down of how much you've got and counting out how many you've got in each distillation is a way of assuring you how far you are, how close you are to the task. If you've decided that you're going to learn 10,000 words, which is more than most, the average English speaker doesn't even have 10,000 words. But if you decided that you were going to learn 10,000 words of English, you know exactly how long it's going to take you, okay, in terms of study time. You can sit down, you can do it. When you finish, you can go to England, or Cyprus, or whatever it is, Australia if you want a bit more exoticism, and then activate it. You'll be a very good English speaker, okay? And it will be without any time wasted, repeating over and over, повторение мать учения, повторение мать учения, повторение мать учения, повторение мать учения, повторение мать учения. Yes, повторение is мать учения, but not if you do it too frequently, okay? There's certainly repetition in this, but there's 14 days gap between each one, yeah? And that's the key to it. I don't want to talk too much because I'm going to bore everybody.
Okay.
But thank you very much.
Yes.
I don't think much of it will be on the film, but you'll see the film later. No, it's still recording. Can't believe it. Isn't that remarkable? Did I not talk for that long then in the end?
I don't know. At least probably an hour.
hours worth of work.
Okay.
But again,
I'll just take this opportunity. If you don't like, I can take this end bit off. But I'd just like to show the world the lovely people that I've been talking to, and lovely Kevin, who's invited me to talk today. Thank you for that.